My greedy aunt declared that she deserved my late grandfather's house more than me because she was the eldest. When I refused to sign it over, she took me to court, confidently smirking. No judge will side with you. The verdict was read, and her smirk vanished as the judge said, "The house is rightfully hers." Case dismissed. I never thought I'd see the inside of a courtroom, let alone be there fighting my own family. But life doesn't care about what you think. It throws you into situations, whether you're ready or not. So here I was, standing in front of a judge, facing off against my aunt, a woman so blinded by greed that she convinced herself she could steal my inheritance. She sat across from me, a smug look plastered on her face, like she already knew she'd won. She leaned in before the hearing started and whispered, "No judge will side with you." She was so sure of herself. She really believed that just because she was the eldest, she was entitled to everything. That my grandfather's will didn't matter. That my entire life in that house didn't matter. Well, she was in for a surprise. My grandfather was the kindest man I had ever known. He took me in after my parents passed away when I was little, and he raised me like his own. We weren't rich, but he made sure I had everything I needed. His house, our house, was a small but cozy place in Savannah, Georgia. It wasn't some grand estate, but it had character. It was filled with the smell of his famous peach cobbler, with old family photos covering every wall, with memories in every corner. He told me, long before he passed, that the house would be mine one day. That when he was gone, he wanted me to have a place to call home. And he followed through. His legally binding will left everything to me. It wasn't up for debate. It wasn't confusing. It was clear as day. Then my Aunt Brenda decided she deserved it more. Not even a week after the funeral, she showed up at my door. She had this fake, sugary sweet voice that instantly put me on edge. "Honey, we need to talk about Grandpa's house." I already knew where this was going. I let her in, mostly because I was still exhausted from everything and didn't have the energy to fight. She sat on my couch like she owned the place, smoothing out the wrinkles in her dress, giving me this sympathetic look. "I know Grandpa put your name on the will," she started, "but I don't think he really meant it that way. You're still young. You can always get another house." I just stared at her. "Brenda, the will is final." Her smile tightened. "Oh, sweetheart, I don't think you understand how these things work. I'm the eldest. It makes sense for me to have it." No. What made sense was honoring Grandpa's wishes. She reached into her bag and pulled out some documents. "I had a lawyer draft this up," she said, sliding the papers toward me. "Just sign it, and I'll take care of the rest." I didn't even look at them. No, her entire face changed. That fake sweetness melted away, and for the first time, I saw the real Brenda. "Don't be difficult," she snapped. "You don't want to make this ugly." I didn't say anything. I just stood up, walked to the door, and held it open. She glared at me, snatched up her papers, and stormed out. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, I got the court summons. She was suing me. She had hired a lawyer and was trying to challenge the will. Her argument? Grandpa was mentally unfit when he wrote it. I had pressured him into leaving me the house. As the eldest, she had the right to the house, no matter what the will said. I couldn't believe it. I knew she was greedy, but this was a whole new level. She was dragging me to court over something that wasn't even hers. And she was smirking the whole time. When I walked into that courtroom, Brenda was already there. She looked so confident. Like she had already won. She even leaned over to whisper, "You might as well give up now. No judge will side with you." I didn't say anything. I just took my seat. Then the judge walked in. Brenda's lawyer stood up first. He was a slimy-looking guy with a cheap suit and an even cheaper argument. He went on and on about how Grandpa was confused when he wrote the will, how he had been manipulated into signing it. He tried to make it sound like I had tricked a helpless old man. Then he called Brenda to the stand. And she put on a show. She cried. She sniffled. She made herself sound like this poor, deserving woman who was just trying to claim what was rightfully hers. She looked straight at the judge and said, "I am the eldest. This house was meant for me." Like that was the ultimate argument. Like just being born first made her entitled to everything. The judge just stared at her for a long time. Then she turned to me. "Do you have the will?" I handed it over. She read through it, nodded, and looked back at Brenda. "Miss Brenda, do you have any evidence that this will is fraudulent?" Brenda didn't hesitate. "It's common sense. I'm the eldest. My father would never leave me with nothing." The judge sighed and rubbed her temples like she was getting a migraine. "Miss Brenda, do you understand how inheritance law works?" Brenda blinked. This will is clear. It is signed, notarized, and legally binding. Your father made his decision. There is no case here." Brenda's smug expression finally started to crack. She turned to her lawyer like she expected him to say something. He didn't. She turned back to the judge. But the judge cut her off. Case dismissed. Just like that. Brenda just sat there, frozen. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no words came out. Her lawyer started packing up his things, probably realizing he wasn't getting paid. I stood up, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Brenda turned to me, and for the first time, she wasn't smirking. She was furious. I could see it in her eyes. This wasn't over. But at that moment, I had already won. I thought that would be the end of it. The judge had spoken. The case was dismissed. The house was legally mine. But I had underestimated just how far Brenda was willing to go. She wasn't done. Not by a long shot. 2 days after the verdict, I woke up to find my phone blowing up with messages. Cousins. Uncles. Even some distant relatives I barely spoke to. Why are you being so selfish? Your aunt took care of your grandfather too. She deserves something. You're young. Why not just let her have it? Brenda had gone on a full-blown smear campaign. She was calling every family member who would listen, spinning the story to make me look like the villain. In her version, I had stolen the house, taking advantage of Grandpa's confusion in his final days. She conveniently left out the legal will and the fact that Grandpa had been perfectly fine when he made it. But facts didn't matter to people who already wanted to believe her. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. At first, I tried to explain. I told people the truth. Some understood. Some didn't want to hear it. It didn't take long for me to realize that arguing with them was pointless. And Brenda? She was thriving off the drama. That's when things got worse. One night, around midnight, I was watching TV when I heard pounding on my front door. Not knocking. Pounding. I jumped up, heart hammering. I checked the peephole. It was Brenda. She was standing there, her face twisted in rage, her fist raised to hit the door again. I didn't open it. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started recording. I know you're in there, she yelled. You think this is over? You think you can just sit in there, living in my house, while I have nothing? Her house. Unbelievable. I didn't say a word. She pounded on the door for another full minute, then finally stormed off. I thought that would be it. Nope. The next morning, I walked outside to find my car covered in eggs. Eggshells and yolk dripped down the windshield, the hood, even the side mirrors. The whole thing smelled disgusting under the Georgia heat. I knew exactly who did it. But there were no cameras facing the driveway, and I didn't have proof. So I just cleaned it up and went on with my day. Then, 2 days later, I woke up to find all 4 of my tires slashed. This time, I called the cops. I knew I couldn't prove Brenda did it, but I still filed a police report. I wanted it on record. When she heard about it, she called me, laughing. You think the cops are gonna help you? You have no proof, sweetheart. Then she hung up. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just bitterness. This was a war. A week passed. The harassment didn't stop. Mysterious, plumbing issues started happening in my house. I'd wake up to water running, only to find the downstairs bathroom flooded. My mailbox was stuffed with nasty anonymous letters, except the handwriting looked an awful lot like Brenda's. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. Is this my name? Yes. This is First State Bank. We need to discuss your overdue mortgage payment. What? I didn't have a mortgage. I own the house outright. There was a long silence when I told them that. Then the person on the phone hesitated before asking, Ma'am, are you aware that someone recently attempted to take out a home equity loan on your property? I felt my stomach drop. Brenda. That crazy woman had tried to take out a loan against my house. I drove straight to the bank. Sure enough, someone had forged my signature and submitted an application, using my house as collateral. But Brenda had made a crucial mistake. She had used her own contact information. Her phone number. Her email. She really thought she was going to get away with this. I didn't go to Brenda's house. I went straight to the police. I showed them everything. The fake loan application. The harassment. The vandalism. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This was fraud. They took it seriously. They told me to sit tight while they investigated. And then, 2 days later, Brenda showed up at my house again. This time, she wasn't yelling. She was smiling. Let's be reasonable, she said, as if she hadn't spent the last few weeks making my life hell. I'll drop everything. The loan, the court stuff, all of it. Just let me have the house. I laughed in her face. You're done, Brenda. Her smile vanished. She must have seen something in my face, because for the first time, she looked nervous. She knew. She knew the police were involved. And for the first time, I saw something I never thought I'd see on Brenda's face. Fear. Brenda stood there, gripping her purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. She opened her mouth, then shut it again. For the first time, she was speechless. I didn't say anything else. I just stared at her, arms crossed, waiting for her to make her next move. She did what she always did, she doubled down. You called the cops on me? Her voice was all fake outrage, like she was the victim. You tried to commit fraud, I said flatly. She scoffed. Fraud? Oh, please. You're blowing this out of proportion. I was just trying to steal from me? Again. Her face twitched. I hit a nerve. Then, just like that, she switched tactics. Her shoulders dropped, and she sighed dramatically, like she was exhausted. Look, I made a mistake, all right? I was desperate. I didn't think it would go this far. Lies. She absolutely thought it would go this far. She just didn't think she'd get caught. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A voicemail. From the bank. I played it on speaker, just for the hell of it. Hello, this is Jennifer from First State Bank. I wanted to follow up on that fraud report you filed. We have surveillance footage of the woman who tried to take out the loan. Please call us back as soon as possible. I looked up just in time to see Brenda's face drain of all color. She didn't wait for me to say anything. She spun around and bolted to her car. I let her go. I didn't need to stop her. The police would handle that soon enough. Or so I thought. I called the bank back. They confirmed it. Brenda had walked into the branch in broad daylight on camera with a badly forged version of my signature. She was sloppy, which meant she was getting desperate. That should have been the final nail in the coffin. The police had all the proof they needed to charge her. But then, the investigation stalled. For 2 weeks, I heard nothing. No updates. No arrests. Then, one night, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something told me to answer. Is this my name? The voice was deep, unfamiliar. Who's asking? There was a long pause. Then, drop the charges against Brenda. My stomach clenched. What? Excuse me? I said. You heard me, the voice said. Let it go. Walk away. This doesn't have to get messy. Messy. My blood ran cold. Who is this? Click. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, heart pounding. This wasn't just Brenda being an idiot. Someone else was involved. The next morning, I went straight to the police station. I told them about the call. They took it seriously. They traced the number. It was a burner phone. Who the hell was Brenda working with? Then, as I was leaving the station, my phone buzzed again. A text. You should have listened. Attached was a photo of my house. Taken that morning. Someone was watching me. I knew one thing. Brenda wasn't smart enough to pull this off alone. She was greedy. Manipulative. But she wasn't the type to think ahead. Which meant she had help. I started digging. And that's when I found it. Brenda was in deep debt. Not just credit card maxed out debt. Not just late on a car payment debt. We're talking loan sharks. I don't know when it started, but at some point, Brenda had borrowed money from the wrong people. And then she couldn't pay them back. So she got desperate. She thought she could steal the house, take out a loan against it, and use that money to pay them off. And when that failed, they came after me instead. 2 nights later, I woke up to the sound of glass breaking. I jolted upright, heart hammering. Then, a loud thud from the living room. Someone was in my house. I grabbed my phone and called 911 immediately. Then I heard footsteps. Heavy. Slow. I locked my bedroom door, shoved a chair under the handle, and backed up toward the closet. The operator was still on the line. Stay calm. Officers are on the way. Something slammed against my door. Once. Twice. I held my breath. Then, silence. I don't know how long I stood there waiting. It felt like hours. Finally, sirens. By the time the cops arrived, whoever had broken in was gone. But they left something behind. A knife. Stabbed into my coffee table. A single piece of paper underneath it. Next time, we won't miss. I sat on my couch, staring at the knife in my coffee table. The words on the note burned into my brain. Next time, we won't miss. I should have been scared. Maybe I was. But mostly, I was furious. This wasn't just some inheritance fight anymore. This was an all-out war. Brenda had dragged me into something way bigger than a family dispute. And I was done playing defense. I called the police again. They took the knife, the note, and the broken glass seriously this time. They finally admitted what I already knew. Brenda wasn't working alone. I pushed for more action. I wasn't going to sit around and wait to be attacked again. And that's when it all came crashing down. The cops started digging harder. Turns out, Brenda had been making payments to a known loan shark. Cash deposits, wire transfers, even a desperate attempt to sell her car. But it wasn't enough. And when she couldn't pay, they came after me. That break-in? That threat? It wasn't random. They were trying to scare me into handing over the house. And Brenda? She let it happen. When the police confronted her, she crumbled instantly. She denied it at first, of course. She screamed about how it was all a big misunderstanding, but the evidence was there. The fraud, the vandalism, the threats. Then the police hit her with the real kicker. They had footage of her meeting with the men who broke into my house. It was over. Brenda was arrested. But before they took her away, I went to see her. She was sitting in a small interrogation room, her hands cuffed in front of her. She looked up when I walked in, and for the first time since this all started, she looked broken. I sat down across from her. Was it worth it? I asked. She let out a shaky breath. I didn't have a choice. I scoffed. You had a choice, Brenda. You could have left me alone. You could have figured out your own mess. But instead, you tried to destroy me. She flinched. I needed the money. You don't get it. No, Brenda. I don't get it. Because I would never sell out family the way you did. Silence. Then, she cracked. Tears welled in her eyes. Real tears this time. I was drowning, she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. I borrowed from the wrong people. I thought, if I could just get the house, I could fix everything. I could sell it, pay them off, and start over. I shook my head. And you didn't care who you hurt in the process. She blinked hard, like she wanted to argue. But she couldn't. Because she knew I was right. She hadn't cared. She had called me selfish, but the truth was, she was the selfish one. She had lied, manipulated, stolen, and when that didn't work, she put my life in danger. I stood up. I hope it was worth it, Brenda. Because this is the last time we will ever speak. She broke down completely as I walked out. Brenda was charged with fraud, conspiracy, and harassment. She took a plea deal. 5 years in prison. She begged me not to testify. But I did. Because she needed to face the consequences of what she did. Her loan shark friends? They got arrested too. Turns out, they had a long history of extortion, threats, and worse. If I hadn't fought back, I might have ended up just another victim. It took me a long time to feel safe in my own home again. For weeks, I jumped at every sound. Every knock on the door made my stomach tighten. But slowly, the fear faded. And one morning, as I sat on the porch drinking coffee, I realized something. Brenda had lost everything. Not just the house. Not just her money. She lost me. And despite everything, that was the one thing she couldn't replace. I should have felt victorious. But mostly, I just felt tired. Because in the end, there was no real winner. Just a broken family and a house full of memories. Memories that belonged to me. And no one, not even Brenda, could ever take that away.